So up next, we have our first keynote for the summit. We're really excited to have, for the first time, the Texas Commissioner of Agriculture, Sid Miller, who's joining us. He served back in the Texas House of Representatives and was elected Commissioner of Agriculture back in 2014 and reelected in 2018. His career really reflects a commitment to promoting agriculture, rural communities, and just generally service to Texas. So you can view his full bio on our live event program. I'll continue to plug that over and over the next few days. But if we could get Sid's camera on, we'll turn it over to him. Wonderful. Welcome so much, Commissioner Miller. We're happy to have you. Thanks for joining us. Oh, we don't have your audio quite yet. You may need to unmute yourself. Oh, we're continuing to have some audio difficulties. There we go. Wonderful. Thank you so much for bearing with us and joining us at the virtual Texas Groundwater Summit. And with that, I'm going to sign off and let you share a keynote that I'm sure our audience is excited to hear.
Okay. Well, howdy, neighbors. It's good to be with you. I'm coming to you from my personal office in Stephenville, Texas. If you want to get a hold of the Department of Agriculture, you better email us because there's nobody in the building, nobody to answer the phone. So we're still working every day, you know, but we're all working out of our trucks or from home. I appreciate y'all inviting me to address your group today. What a powerful group that has a lot of influence over Texas, especially Texas agriculture. A little bit about myself. I'm an 8th generation farmer and rancher. My family came to the United States in 1700. We've been making our living off the land ever since. And hey, if we have a couple more good years, I might get the place paid for, hopefully. So we're, you know, I'm a graduate of Tarleton State University. I had a degree in agriculture. Was actually an ag teacher when I got out of college. So I like to tell everybody that our greatest natural resource we have in this state is our youth. We put a big emphasis on the 4-H and those blue corduroy jackets. So those are our future. Those are our future leaders. And we got to have more people coming up in agriculture because it's just, you know, a dying occupation. Texas Department of Agriculture, we do a lot of stuff. You know, everybody thinks we're all about cows, sows, and plows, and we do that, but we're a whole lot more than that. We're a pretty large state agency. I oversee a $6 billion budget. That doesn't mean anything to you, but if I told you my budget was larger than the budget of 31 governors, that kind of puts it in perspective. So we, you know, Texas is, you know, agriculture is the second leading industry in our state. Sometimes when oil drops below $40 a barrel, we go up to #1, but it's a $125 billion industry to our state. 1 in 5 jobs are somehow connected to agriculture in Texas. We lead the nation in agriculture exports, of course, cattle, cotton, wool, mohair, horses, hay, sheep, goats, the list goes on and on. So it's actually agriculture from the inception of Texas, going all the way back to the earliest longhorn cattle drives and the Civil War. Agriculture has always been the glue that's held our state together, and it will continue to be so. We have over 130 statutory functions that we perform for the state. Actually, the Texas Department of Agriculture affects soccer mom's life in Plano, Texas, more than any other state agency. I promise you, we do. We're the consumer protection agency for the state, so we oversee all the regulatory things, you know, weights and measures, scales, pesticides, you name it, we're there. The biggest program that I run is the nutritional programs. I'm responsible for 5 million school meals each day, and so that's been a real challenge of late, because when the COVID hit, we were in the middle of the school year. And so we had to go from feeding kids in the classroom and find other ways to feed them, community centers, and then meals delivered at home. So that's been our biggest challenge during the COVID crisis. I've had to set up over 10,000 new feeding sites that didn't exist prior to the COVID. So now we're transitioning back to school, but we've got a hybrid mix, feeding some of the kids at school. Some of them are still getting home delivered meals. Some of them are still community meals. So it's a handful, believe me. But we really, I'm really proud of my people. They performed well. As soon as the pandemic hit and we had to change all these feeding sites, we also, it's the same time we launched our hemp program. Many of you know that we're now legal to grow hemp in Texas. We launched that March 16th. So far, and just as we launched it, we had to vacate the building. All of our programming people, all our IT people, we didn't even have laptops for all of them. We had to scrounge up some used laptops, and they work from home. The legislature gave us 60 days to issue those licenses. Very proud of my folks. Turnaround time was about 5 days. So we have over 1,000 producers in Texas now, over 5,000 acres and planted. The amazing part, though, is we have over 11 million square feet under glass greenhouses. So that's over 250 acres of greenhouses, which is huge. So it's everybody's excited about that. At the same time, also challenging, we were going through a sunset review. Those of you know what that is. The legislature comes in and goes through your agency with a microscope, just much like a bank auditor would. And the reason they call it sunset, when they get through, if your agency is no longer needed, they let the sunset on you, and it never comes up again. Proud to say we passed with flying colors. One of the best sunset audits that the committee said that they had ever been through. So things are running good here. We had to do things different during the COVID. Also housed the Office of Rural Health Care. We have 163 rural hospitals that we were trying to keep open. They were already very challenged. In rural America, we have the most aged population, the highest uninsured, and the two most dangerous occupations, farming and oil field work. So we had 3 strikes against us, and then the COVID hit. Their income quit. There was no elective surgeries, no sports injuries, very few automobile accidents. That's good. But the bottom line was it just cut all the funding. So we were scrambling around trying to find funding, trying to get the personal protective equipment out to these rural hospitals and centers for medical centers. So my inspectors would normally inspect eggs and scales and things like that. We switched over, used our warehouse in Austin to take deliveries of this personal protective equipment. We made deliveries to these rural areas of the state, delivering personal protective equipment. I joined in, loaded up my truck, went out. Many of you may have seen an episode on 60 Minutes. They followed us around and kind of talked about the plight of rural hospitals. Unfortunately, we had 2 that filed bankruptcy before we were able to draw down enough CARES money to keep them open. They're going to be in good shape now until probably the first of the year. Hopefully, we'll have this pandemic behind us. So some interesting things, I had to get tons of waivers after waiver after waiver. We had plenty of eggs, but you couldn't find them in the grocery store. Bakeries and restaurants, they get eggs in 30-count flats, but according to law, the carton has to have the grade, the size, the farm where it came from, etc. So we got a waiver, and so we're able to, sell those eggs. But the most interesting one was we found a whole huge warehouse of toilet paper. Really? No one could find any toilet paper on shelves anywhere. I said, well, why hasn't this been distributed? They said, well, it's against the law. We can't sell it. I said, why not? I said, well, the instructions, if it's sold in Texas, have to be in English. I said, really? Give me a break. I don't think we need any instructions at all. I think we all know how to use toilet paper. So I got a waiver, and then that's when you saw the Spanish labeled, toilet paper start showing up on the shelves, and we have really run out since. So that's some of the unusual things that we've had to react to, during this COVID crisis. We're looking forward to the day that we can get back to business as usual. We run the export facilities for the state. I have 4 on the Rio Grande and 1 at the airport, where any animal shipped out of the United States from Texas, we operate those. I mentioned the Office of Rural Health Care. Hey, I tell you what, I bet you don't know this. I have highly trained inspectors that inspect ping pong balls. Yeah, I bet you didn't know that. Yep. Guess who for? That's right. Texas lottery. You know, there's a lot of dollars right in those ping pong balls, and there's been some games across the United States that have been rigged and had some problems. But you know, I tell my people, I don't tolerate horse thieves, cattle rustlers, or cheats. So we've got your back on that one. We're the Chamber of Commerce for the state. Many of you have recognized the Go Texan program. We're you know, marketing that. I expanded that program. It was just kind of here in Texas, a local, you know, program to help entrepreneurs, mom and pops get their barbecue sauce up on Amazon or in HEB. But we've taken that globally. The first 12 months, I launched a global outreach initiative where we were marketing Texas products around the globe. I've made personal trips to China, Israel, you know, Germany, the Netherlands, you name it, and it's been very, very successful. We've got a rate of return for every dollar we spent, we bring back about 70. So it worked real good during the tariff wars because we opened up new markets where we didn't have markets for Texas grain sorghum, Texas beef. We opened markets there. So we're expanding our customer base, which is very important, especially in your tariff war. We're winning the tariff wars. Trump has done the best thing he's done for agriculture in a long time. You know, we've been in a tariff war for 50 years. We just never fought back. So finally, we got a president now that's fighting back. Last week, China made record purchases of corn, record purchases of grain sorghum, record purchases of soybeans. So we're back. You start to see the commodity prices come back up, and we're certainly glad of that. As far as water goes, you know, when I did serve 12 years in the legislature, I was a lawmaker, set up the Middle Trinity Groundwater Conservation District here in Central Texas. It's you know, it's the only way we need to go local, and that was my pitch. You know, either the state will come in and manage your groundwater, or you can form a local district and manage it yourself. And that's the way to go. So you guys, I'm big fans of groundwater conservation districts in the management of our natural resource, our water. Y'all have been, you know, a lifesaver for us. You know, basically in a nutshell, the state of Texas owns all the surface water in the state, and we've used it all up. So now we're going to have to come for some groundwater. So that's why it's important to have these groundwater districts, because prior to the groundwater district, we've had rural capture. Y'all know more about this than I do. But so we have the state has a 50-year water plan. It's a good plan. You know, we're going to be fine. It's going to take a lot of infrastructure, a lot of water projects. That's done not through my office, but the water board, and they've got plenty of money there. The legislature on 2 different times it went before the voters, and they've got $5 or $6 billion there, and that's enough, even though it's a $50 billion plan. And the way that works, you launch a project, that project starts creating revenue and pays that one off, and you roll it over and you do another project and another. So I think we're good on funding that the long range water plan here in Texas. So good management. That's what we're about here in Texas. You know, when I took office in 2015, I was bringing all my different departments in, and you know, trying to figure out how to run this $6 billion agency. And I said, all right, bring the people in from our water department. I want to talk to them. And everybody just looked at me kind of funny. They said, we don't have a water department. I said, you got to be kidding me. Agriculture is the largest user of water in the state, and we don't have anybody looking after rural interests in Texas. If the Department of Agriculture said no, I said, well, who do we have? They looked at each other and said, well, we have an entomologist. Will that work? I said, hell no. So I created my own office of water, and we set that up. So we're very involved, and we're there. We're engaged. We're making sure that rural Texas is taken care of. We're making sure that this water development money goes to rural projects, that it doesn't all go to the urban areas. You know, I'm a big proponent of water conservation. That's why I work with the Water Smart Foundation on their projects and working with cities and municipalities on stormwater runoff, recapturing that, recycling, you know, rainwater. The only statewide that's advocating that. So we've got a huge liabilities on getting rid of this stormwater runoff. We can change that into an asset. We can capture that, recycle it. Doesn't take much to clean it up. You don't have to clean it up at all if you want to use it for, you know, landscape or irrigation or put it back into industrial uses, things like that, instead of just letting it run off down the sidewalk. WOTUS, you know, I fought the previous administration on that. We finally got some headway, and in January, the Trump administration came up with the Navigable Waters Protection Rule, which that's what we're under now, and it's replacement for the waters of the U.S. and the NWPR defines groundwater. Is not part of federal jurisdiction. That's what we need to know. That's a huge win for all of us in these groundwater districts. It's not federally regulated. We're going to regulate that by the states and states' rights. Kind of an interesting fact, as I was getting ready for this meeting, that agriculture on average on our irrigation, we use about 18 inches of water a year. Contrast that to the average homeowner that uses about 22. So we're good stewards of what we have, because we have to pay for it. We don't waste water. People think we just waste water and let it run down the bar ditches and into the creek. That's not so. I mean, it costs us, you know, quite a bit of money sometimes to pump this water and to irrigate our crops. Actually, the irrigation usage in Texas is volume-wise has been about the same since the 1970s. We really hadn't increased that. Now we've increased our efficiency. 1970, the efficiency was about 60%, but today we're getting up around 90, 95%, sometimes even more than that with the new technology we have. And we've doubled our production. Of course, that's through, a lot of that's through genetics, but it's also through better irrigation technology and monitoring systems and lack of evaporation and wind blowing. You know, our irrigated agriculture in this state is pretty big business. It's probably somewhere around $5 to $6 billion a year that it brings into our state. You know, it helps us to, you know, double our crop yields, and, you know, it improves our economic viability of our communities. It just adds, you know, to everything. You know, it helps us produce food and fiber, so we're not dependent on some foreign nation for that. So I think Texas is probably at the forefront in our water resources. So that's kind of a nutshell as for the Texas Department of Agriculture is on water conservation. You know, this is my Stevensville office, but if we were broadcasting from my Austin office, you'd see a 7-foot Indian headdress over here to my right. And people look at that and say, well, what in the world are you doing with that in here? I said, you know, I look at, there's a purpose for that. That Indian headdress, you know, at one time before we were here, the Comanches ruled the plains. And they were good stewards of the land. And they understood sustainability before it was a buzzword. So that's what we all need to be about. We need to be about good stewards of the land. You know, I tell everybody where I go, and we're terrible at telling our story. We let you know, the greenies and the humaniacs tell our story for us. I tell everybody that every farmer has this goal. And it doesn't matter if you're milking cows in upstate New York, or growing apples in Washington State, you're growing cotton on the South Plains of Texas. Every farmer wants to leave his place in better shape than his sons and grandsons and grandchildren than they found it. And that's a goal that's common amongst all of us in agriculture. So with that, I don't know whether y'all want to open up for questions or not. I'll give you that opportunity. If you have some, I'll be glad to field some questions.
Thank you so much for that, Commissioner Miller. Yes, we do have a couple questions that have come in. Appreciate all of your thoughts and telling us not only about the department as a whole, but also your perspectives on water. And not surprisingly, the questions coming in are about water. One was, can you give us your point of view of moving large volumes of water from rural to urban, and how should those types of projects be managed?
Well, you know, the conservative, the libertarian side of it says, you know, no regulations, but unfortunately, we've got to pick the lesser of the evil. So I like the local control. I like the groundwater districts, you know, being involved in that, setting those regulations, well spacing, how much, you know, volume you can pump out of the aquifer, and that protects everybody. You know, we've had some instances across the state with Ozarka and with the catfish farming, you know, that just you know, started drying up wells around them, and I've seen that in other parts of the state. So we need to protect those property rights. I'm not against, cross basin water transfer. If that's your water and you want to sell it, and you only pump your water that you're allocated, get after it. I'm not against that. We're going to need that in other parts of the state. So, that's kind of my position on that.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Another question that came in was, what are your thoughts on aquifer storage and recovery? How feasible that is to strip away floodwaters and maybe inject that into compatible aquifers for providing water supply?
I think that's a great idea. Instead of letting it run down and run into the coast, we've done some of that in Texas. Not necessarily, not a lot of it in aquifer storage, but we lost. One time we had about 500,000 acres of rice down on the prairie, down in the Houston area, Eagle Lake area. Of course, the Highland Lakes dried up. That water did not flow down to Colorado. So now we built storage so we can capture some of that runoff water. We've got off-channel storage. This is surface storage, but we can certainly do that in underground storage areas, and that's better than the surface because there's no evaporation and it's there when we need it.
Thank you for that. And this third question that came in, it's actually maybe ties the bow really nicely on this conversation. What advice do you have for groundwater conservation districts as they carry out that charge they have to preserve, conserve, and protect groundwater with the need to balance those private property rights?
Well, the biggest thing that's always been is you got to get good information out there. The first thing when somebody's talking about, forming a groundwater conservation district, they're going to meter my wells and they're going to, cut off my water and they're going to make me pay for my water. We've got to get the word out there, and we've got to have good spokesmen because, all the negative stuff comes out. And if people really understood the advantage of the groundwater conservation district, they would all be for it. But when I created the one here in Central Texas, about half the counties voted it down. They didn't want it. And now they've had to come back and join this one or join another one but it took some time to educate them. So I think the biggest challenge we have is educating the public as to what a groundwater conservation district is, and it's for the public good.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. That's something that we're always striving to do, is really get the word out there on what groundwater conservation districts are doing and how they're trying to work to protect that resource. Thank you so much, Commissioner Miller, for joining us today. This has been so interesting. Love hearing your perspectives on your department, groundwater, agricultural communities, and really appreciate you joining us in this virtual setting. It's not ideal. We wish we could have rolled out the red carpet for you, but it's the best we could do this year.
This is great. Thank y'all very much. And remember, without agriculture, you'd be hungry, naked, and always sober. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Miller.
Thank y'all.